Okay, well, thank you everyone so much for coming. I really appreciate you being here. There are a lot of really cool talks at this time slot. Like I looked and I'm like, oh, I don't get to go to those ones. So I appreciate you choosing mine. Thank you very much. And I'm really excited to be here. I've never been to Oslo before. And I have to say so far it's been cold and delicious, like in equal proportions. So today I'm going to talk about so my title is Purple is the New Black, which doesn't really mean very much. We're going to talk about securing modern applications and how it's a bit different. We're going to talk about kind of collaboration and how we could be a little bit nicer to software developers. I'm going to rant a little bit because that's a thing you get to do when you hold a microphone. And yeah. Oh, and I'm Tanya. I think I have a slide somewhere where I explain that I am Tanya. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about red team, which is like offensive security. And I don't mean we walk around and we swear at people, although sometimes when you're a pen tester, I don't know if you've been a pen tester, but sometimes you do need to swear. And so we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about blue team and how it's defensive security, and a little bit like what that means. That's also very important. And then we're going to talk about purple team, and I like to call it collaborative security. This is my opinion. So I feel like the AppSec team, if they're doing a good job, they're doing collaborative security. And we're going to talk a lot about that. And then we're going to talk about, oh, wait, no, back. And then we're going to talk about some best practices across the board, because I end up teaching it all the time. And I find that a lot of us will be really good at one thing, but knowing the best practices across the board makes us actually really well-rounded, and it makes us sound smart in meetings. And so that's worth doing. So small rant. So when I tell people I work in the cybers, as Scott Helm said this morning, and Troy Hunt was like, I work in cyber, people think of this guy. Do I look like that guy? No. I look around this room and I don't think of that guy. And I'm not like loving that that's what they see. They're like, oh, they're a criminal and they're dangerous. Oh, you're a hacker, don't hack me. And I'm like, no, I help people. So this is what I think of. I think of us helping, protecting people. I like to think of the work we do as being very noble. Like the work we do is good. So you know how when people have poor grammar and they'll say, I did good? That's not what I mean. I mean like Superman performs good in the world. And I feel that that's what we do. I literally feel that. I feel like a lot of pride in the work that we do. And so when people think of like Mr. Robot or like someone, so I love black hoodies, I have like 12, but like I don't want them to only think of that. Do you know what I mean? And so who am I? So I'm Tanya Janca, and I work at SumGrep. They acquired my little tiny company last year, and that was very exciting for me. And I started a company called We Hack Purple years ago. I wrote a book, and I'm writing another book, and I'm way behind. I've worked in tech a really long time, so like the moment I was legal to work, I was working in tech. And I have not stopped. I like it. I like train, I start up, I break things, I build things. I am a giant application security nerd at your service, in summary. Like, that's what I do. So if you take anything away, just be like, she really likes software and security. Okay, and I look nice when I brush my hair. So purple team, this is what we're going to cover today. So 1, we're going to talk about collaboration, empathy, and advocacy. And we're not going to talk about it for a long time, but I've put it first because I feel it's surprisingly important. This might sound weird, but when I was a dev, I was not those things. I didn't need to be. I didn't need to negotiate. I didn't need to persuade. I'm like, here's my code, take it or leave it. I didn't have to have a lot of empathy. I didn't have to try to listen to the other side. I'm just like, cool, I'll just code it to work like that, no problem. And when I switched to security, I had to learn all these new social skills. And it was hard. And then I want to talk, so the meat of the whole talk will be security tactics for modern apps, so some best practices across the board. Then we're going to talk about automating boring stuff really briefly, because if you're in this room, you love tech, and you probably really like automating things. I find that a very fun part of the job. And then we're going to talk briefly about continuous learning. And so you are all continuously learning right now. You wouldn't be here if you didn't care about learning. So you're already sort of aboard that train, and we'll talk about a couple options. Okay, so quick definitions. So when I speak at a conference, I don't always know what everyone knows. So if you know some of this, please forgive me. It'll be 1 minute, and it's to make sure everyone comes along for the whole trip. And so what is AppSec? Or application security. So it's everything that you do. It's any and everything you do to make sure your software is secure. So this could be being an application security engineer who all day long, all they do is help teams make more secure software. This could be you, a software developer, who's like, hey, I listened to this podcast. I heard there's this big vulnerability. It's called Log4j. It sounds kind of terrifying. I think we should check to see if we have it. Like any part of that is you doing like the good work that we need you to do, that we need your help with, right? And so AppSec's any of the things that we do to make software more secure. Oh, I said that because no one else was willing to say it for me, so I could quote them. So then what do I mean by red team? So red team is adversarial security. It's offensive security. It's actually testing against a production system usually. And the idea is it's finding like a real risk. So when we threat model, those are theoretical risks. When we look at security architecture and we're trying to find problems, those are theoretical risks. When you punch an app directly in the face as a red teamer, you are finding real risk. You're like, I broke in, here's your password. Aha, okay, thank you, I'll fix that. So it's adversarial, it's aggressive, it's testing limits, and it's really important, but equally important is blue team. And blue team are defenders, they are our protectors. They do things like ensure that we have defenses, and that they work properly. They patch, they monitor, they log, they shield our apps and our systems from abuse. And I do not understand why, but for some reason, red team's really sexy and everyone wants that job and blue team's lame. And I'm like, no, I disagree. I think they're both equally important, and blue team is more likely to give you a full-time paycheck. So I'm just like, where did this come from? But what I wanted to talk about was purple team, which I like to think of as collaboration, empathy, and advocacy, plus a bunch of technical skills, which I take for granted. I feel like, well, actually, let's go into it. So what is a purple team? So some people are like, oh, it's red team plus blue team, but I don't really agree. Like when you do a purple team exercise, that's where you have the blue team and the red team kind of face off, and you figure out, basically the red team helps test the purple team, or helps test the blue team. And they help them get better, they help them find things, they tune, they continue, and they help each other improve. But the purple team idea is that not only can you do both those things, but that we're gonna collaborate together, that we're gonna cooperate, we're gonna communicate better. And I like to think of the purple team as the AppSec folks. Like when I joined, this might sound weird, but when I was a dev, I joined the security team and they'd always say like, why are you on their side? Why do you always side with the devs? I'm like, cause they're right. Because I found the security team was doing things that got in their way, was doing things to not enable them to make more secure software. They're doing compliance, which is not always conducive to progress and deadlines and quality. They were doing things like applying a policy without thinking first. They were doing things in ways that were slow and tedious and painful and expensive. And I'm like, can't we do better? Like, let's work with them instead of against them. Let's stop being friction all the time. And so I had to learn more communication skills because I wasn't that great. I'd love to tell you, like, I was so awesome the first day. Not true. And so I had to do a lot of teaching, like first of myself, then of all the devs. I had to provide tools, I had to enable and help. And like, that's what you do when you're an AppSec person. You need to have a lot of soft skills and a lot of technical skills to be good at your job. And so I like to think of us as a bridge, like a bridge between the security team and the developer team. And I know we all report to the security team, but I feel like we need to be on both sides of that bridge on the regular basis. Like we need to see both sides and not just take the side of our boss every time, because we won't get things done. And I find that like when you can empathize with someone and say, hey, okay, so you have this gigantic, ridiculous deadline Friday, that's cool. When can we meet Monday to talk about this? Because this can totally wait till then. And they're just like, oh, reasonableness, awesome. I remember someone telling me, you don't have to be better than them, you just have to be more reasonable. And so what does the Purple team do, right? So they have consultations with software developers. They offer guidance, assistance, what I like to call enablement. So make the devs know all the things they need to know and have all the tools they need to have so they can be awesome. It's shorter to say enablement. Like give them tools. So sometimes that means like a static analysis tool. Sometimes that means you're building a tool or a library for them. Sometimes it means you're making a one-pager that says, okay, you're gonna build an API, that's awesome. Here's the 4 things I really need from you, and here's how you do them. Yeah, sometimes creating tools if necessary. Documentation that makes sense. That's a surprisingly rare thing in our field. Like I know that some of us are, so I watched a talk an hour ago where he was talking about an RFC, and I'm like, I'm so glad he's translating it for me into plain English, because RFCs are really hard to read. And so like, let's make documentation that we can understand. And then the last one, advocates for security and developers. I wanted to just put it on its own page. So we need to advocate for security to the developers, and then we need to advocate for the developers to the security team. So sometimes that means the developers just have this really important requirement for the business or whatever, and we're like, we have to compromise on the security side. And sometimes it's the other way, and we need to be able to explain this in language that makes sense to both sides. And so you can't say, oh, the session ID needs to be ephemeral. That means short-lived. I can't code something that's short-lived, because you're not going to get what you think you're going to get. That's too vague. That's not specific. I need specifics. I need you to speak to me in the language that I work. And so when we advocate, it's the way we speak, it's how we pay attention, how we empathize, how we negotiate, how we persuade. And this was really hard for me. I don't know about any of you. Were you all just like perfect communicators immediately? You just put up your hand and then I'm going to come worship at you? No, okay. You never know. There could be that one person. Okay, so the Purple team, in my opinion, is a modern way to do application security, a modern way to secure our apps. When I was a dev, I remember one day, I saw the security person coming, and he had just said no 1,000 times to me. He had made me miss so many deadlines. His name was Bruce. He meant well, but I saw him, and I went like this. And then I looked, and I saw my boss, and he was like, he's like, Tanya, you have to face the security team. You can't literally hide. And I was like, well, I could have if you weren't there. And I had to learn to work with them better, but they had to learn to work with me. And they used to just come up and say no. And I'm like, I still have to get this done. So no, but you can do it this way. No, you can't do that. Or instead of no, you can't do that, how about that causes a lot of business risk. And here's how it causes that risk. Here's 3 other ways we could do it that are safer. Could you pick one of them? And this is, like when I first started giving talks, people were like, this is a crazy idea. We're going to be nice to them? Yeah, I know. It's wild. So what do I mean by advocacy? So advocacy, so I have some principles for success. And so when you are trying to work between the 2 teams, so I did not come up with these. I was looking how to do a better job, found these, and these really, really work. So if you are having trouble getting between the 2 teams and getting like some cooperation, building trust, because this was something I had to work really hard on, these are principles that can help. So if you bring yourself back to these can help. And I have them, I have like some free courses that are on the internet that I'm going to put a link to at the end. And so if you're like, I can't remember, I have like a whole course about it. So that is free. I'm not selling it. Okay, so independence. So we want them to be able to self-service whenever possible. Confidentiality. I do not mean covering crimes, right? But like sometimes someone bends a policy a little bit and you kind of catch them and then you're like, let's do it a different way. You don't need to go and run and tell their boss necessarily, right? Like if we're trying to build trust, sometimes we need to be confidential. Human-centered approach. Don't give them 30,000 bugs in a static analysis report that you didn't bother reading. No one's fixing that. That's not human. No human's going to read that, right? Or, oh, let's give them 100 things to do overnight so they theoretically are going to work Friday night until Monday morning with no breaks because you have waited last minute to give them their work. You have forgotten that they are a human. Empowerment. So that means giving them tool, process, knowledge so that they can be great. If you find the process hard, it must be way worse for them. Equal opportunities. So I like to give everyone access to security, not just the senior devs. I think all of the devs are worth talking to and giving time and attention to. Accountability. So if I'm going to go give someone crap that they have not met their service level agreement or their SLA, I look at mine and I'm almost always like, oh, I'm worse. Okay. And then I have a gentler talk. Accessibility. So whenever possible, try to make it so all the people on the team can access the thing. People will really appreciate it if you work with people that are blind, that are deaf, etc. Like making sure that they are always included and on equal footing. That will definitely build trust. And then empathy. So it turns out that soft skills are actually just life skills, and that if you don't have them, you're not going to do that well in tech. That is the thing I found out. Like basically, if you want to get promoted and do all the things, especially in security, these soft skills are actually way more essential than when I was younger than I realized. Like, why did they not teach me that in computer science? I was there like 4 years. And so briefly, I think that we worship idols in our industry, and that was weird for me coming from software development. Like, I feel like we have an obsession with hackers. I feel like our society has an obsession, but our industry is so obsessed with hackers. And people will tell me, like, we're not that obsessed. And I'm like, I don't know. It seems like really obsessed to me. I mean, these are just films. This doesn't even include TV shows, books, etc. There are not this many books about accountants. And there are way more accountants on the planet, right? And we're so obsessed with it. It has resulted in these security models no one can afford. So I do a lot of consulting with companies. I've worked with over 400 AppSec teams now, or just under 400 actually. And as a result, I've seen so many programs, and a lot of programs are just like, we pen test the important ones and we hope for the best with the rest. That's the most expensive way to do security. Why? And it's because we're obsessed with hackers. Now, just to be clear, I used to be a pen tester and earn my living that way. Lots of the people in this room are pen testers. That job's important, but it's not the only important job, right? Like AppSec, I want to be there at your kickoff meeting when you are starting to build this app. I want to give you security requirements. I want to review your design. I want to be there until the day you go out into prod. And then I want to keep being there until the day you commission your app, right? And we have like these security models, I think, because we're obsessed with hackers. And I think we need to calm down a little bit. Yeah, I think it's harming our industry. I really do. Okay, so briefly, I run this thing, which is free, and you're all invited to participate in every Monday on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Mastodon. It's called Cyber Mentoring Monday. And I match people with professional mentors. And by I match them, I mean I let you connect with each other, because I am a terrible matchmaker. I mean well, but I'm a terrible matchmaker. Every match I've made did not work out. You are better pickers than I am. That's okay. The first year or two of this, almost 100% of requests were, I want to be a pen tester. I want to be a hacker. And it's changed over the years. And now people are like, I want to learn incident response. I want to learn threat hunting. I want to be a SOC engineer. Now they're realizing there's more jobs. But I kid you not, for 2 straight years, every single Monday, 20 people, I want to be a pen tester. I'm like, you can't all want to be pen testers. There are more jobs. There are so many more jobs, and all of the cyber jobs are important. So I feel like us with the movies and like the hackers are cool, blah, blah, blah. I feel like that's why it's hard to hire security engineers. because we're only publicizing one job out of the 20 or 30 that exist. Like, we need risk analysts. We need them. We need the firewall guy. We need those jobs. Anyway, so I'm going to try to stop ranting about that. Okay, so modern application security. So this is part of also what the Purple team does. So I want to go over some best practices. This will help you sound smart in many meetings. I bet all of you know some of this, and only a few of you know all of this. Okay, so briefly, zero trust. It is not a product, despite what all the marketing teams say. So this is a concept. And if you can apply it at all, you will be way more secure. So the idea of zero trust is, let me go back. The idea of zero trust is that we don't have implied trust in the systems we create. So us humans, we are social creatures. And how do I word this nicely? We trust by default, generally, as a species, and that's how we get along and have society, and it's good generally. With computers, we need to not be at all like that. We need to distrust by default, and that's hard for us because that's not our nature. And so when we design things by default, we have all these little places where we just imply trust. We're like, I'm sure it's fine. It's not, as we have been told by many a pen tester. And so the idea of zero trust is you don't open the thing unless you know for sure you should open the thing. And so within our applications, between applications, in our configurations, in our network. So for instance, we have 65,000 ports. Why are they open? They should not be open. We should close all of them except maybe one or two. And what if we close those 98% of the time, like when they're not in use, right? Like, why do we have 65,000 ports open by default? Why? Because we trust by default. So with zero trust comes something called assume breach. And so this is another concept, and I'm telling you this because if you can apply these literally anywhere, your life will be better. It's hard work to apply them, but if you do, it's totally worth it. So assume breach is the idea that you design and you react as though one day, or you already have been, breached. And so, for instance, like let's say someone reports something to your bug bounty program. And I've had this happen. We didn't even have a bounty program, just someone tweeted at us, yo, I found this, that's bad. And I looked and I was like, oh, that is quite bad. And we cleaned it up. And then I woke up in the middle of the night and was like, oh my gosh, what if that guy finding it was the 10th person, not the first? And so I went and looked through my logs and was like, no. But if I hadn't assumed breach and gone and looked and investigated, I wouldn't have found all of that, right? And it would have been bad. And so the idea of assume breach is in every aspect of IT. So when you design and when you react, and the reacting part I find a little harder than the designing part. So this means adding multiple layers of defense, for instance, because you assume that some of them are going to be breached at some point. And so as we go through these, the rest of them, you might think of how you can apply these two concepts. And these two concepts are new. They're still old. Compared to some of the other things, they're new. And I'm mentioning them because, one, they are not products you can purchase, unfortunately, despite some marketing teams naming their products this. And it's not a feature generally that you can toggle and turn on. It's a concept that you can apply and get value from. Okay, so serverless and cloud workflows. So serverless is basically an app that doesn't have a server. When you call a serverless app or you trigger it, a container boots up, the app starts up, it runs to completion, it self-destructs, it releases all of the resources back onto the cloud so that someone else can use it. And the idea is what if your app only needs to run 9 minutes a month? Why are you paying for the rest of the month, right? Why are you using up resources that could be used for something else? It's brilliant. And then a cloud workflow is automations that work in the cloud. So the cloud can detect various things, and then you can tell it, if you see something that looks like this, please do that. So how do we secure those? Besides following the same application security practices we always would do, so we would validate our inputs. If we put something on a screen, we output encode it, things like that. So I talk about that stuff to death. But what is important for these specifically? So first of all, we should monitor and log this stuff. And I know we should log and monitor web apps, but I'm telling you this because no one ever turns that on, ever. Every time they're like, oh, can you go investigate that? How? There's no logs. We were talking about it at breakfast the other day. How can I investigate when you've given me zero evidence? How can I tell it's down when you don't let me monitor it? So please turn those on. Use the same secure coding conventions you normally would. Oh, wait, actually, no, these are the old ones. These are the new ones. Okay, so plus. So you can put an API gateway in front of a serverless app and protect it so that you have authentication, authorization, rate limiting, input validation. You can use API gateways for more than APIs, and they are nifty. So you can monitor and log, but what if you feed those logs into your SIM, your security information event management system, and then you actually have someone monitoring and looking at those instead of a dev receiving an email and looking at it when he has time in between meetings? So it's not that new, but no one does it. I've spoken at SplunkConf a couple years about this, and I'm like, who's done this? And 0 hands 100% of the time. So one day, we're supposed to put our secrets in a secret management tool, and everyone should do that, and I mention it because I don't see it with serverless apps. So these next two are weird, and I got them from a Sneak article years ago, and I keep applying them. So the idea is a serverless app should probably do one thing. It shouldn't do 27 things. If you need to invoke it 150 times a day, maybe you need a server. When we do so many things, it stops needing to be a serverless app, and then your attack surface is much larger, and then you're not really getting very many benefits. So that's one. So that is number 4. That's what number 4 means. I'm translating. So number 5, isolated function parameters. So again, I'm like, why can't you just write in English? So what they mean is that each thing needs to be its own island. And a lot of pen testers can tell you this. So the web front end will totally authenticate when it calls an API. Awesome. Authenticate, authorize. Yeah, I like that. And then that API will call a serverless app or an API or something else. No authentication, no authorization, sometimes no encryption, no nothing. I'm good. I'm behind the firewall. Everything's cool. It's not cool. Because then the pen tester's like, cool, I'm going to call it, and I'm not going to call it nice things. And so all of them need to be their own island. All of them need the same amount of security, even if it's 4 things down the line, because that malicious actor is not going to be like, oh, I should follow the process and go. No, they'll do whatever they want. So sorry I have to translate it, but I wanted to quote them. Okay, so next. Third-party components and library management. So software supply chain is like the hottest topic, and there's probably 20 talks about this here. I got to talk about it at lunch, and I got to talk about it at breakfast. So basically, open source or not, every bit of third-party code, so code your team did not write, that is in your app presents risk. And so that could be a NuGet package, a Ruby gem, that awesome, cool, brand new JavaScript framework. All of that is code you didn't write. But if it's in your app, it might be risky, right? And so that is part of our supply chain. There's other parts of our supply chain that for some reason a lot of the vendors are not talking about, like your code repository. I have worked at 2 different places that lost their code repo. Oh gosh, no, 3. I just remembered the 3rd one. Sometimes when I consult places, I kind of forget because I'm not there full time, if that makes sense. But anyway, when you lose your code repository, you're losing millions of dollars, right? You're losing months and months of work, sometimes years of work. You're making your employees' hearts break. So like even just your CI/CD, all the time that you spend setting that up, that's time, that's money, that's effort. You need to protect those configurations. Like, I know that sounds nuts, but I've seen people lose their CI/CD and then they have to spend a week setting it all up and getting it perfect again, and it's all janky and not running right, and then finally they can release to prod again. All of that needs to be protected. That's part of your supply chain security. And so there are tools, software composition analysis tools, sometimes called software supply chain security tools. I don't know, they're naming them all sorts of things. But basically what they'll do is they'll tell you, hey, you have these 12 libraries. Those 12 libraries have friends because they call other libraries. You have like a total of 48 libraries, and that might astound you. It's like, wow, that's a lot of code. And then I'll say, these 6 have vulnerabilities in them. Ideally, if you're awesome, you could upgrade off all of those, but you probably don't have a lot of time, so you might want to just find out, oh, the vulnerability in that library, it is or is not reachable or exploitable from my code. So that means, so when you have a library, it might have like 500 functions. And one of those functions, or two of those functions, or three have a vulnerability. If you're not calling them, you're usually okay. If you are calling them, you're probably not okay. It's not 100%, it's like 98%. And so if you can figure that out, then you can decide I do or do not need to fight this battle with this developer to fix this thing. So ideally, you're going to scan your repo regularly and check for those and fix those. You're going to back up your code repo, but like you're serious about it. Like it really matters. You're going to back up your configurations on your CI/CD. Yeah, I like to scan in my pipeline. I like to scan my code repository regularly. So if I'm not updating my code, I'm still checking it because libraries. So software is not like wine where it gets better as time goes on. It's like cheese in the sun. It ages badly. And so you should still check it even if you're not actively working on it. Okay, that one's good. Online storage. Who here has had online storage go badly? Okay, so the rest of you are fibbing. So online storage, so online storage, I'm sure you all know, but it's basically like it's a blob online. You can put a whole bunch of stuff there. I don't mean Dropbox where humans put stuff so other humans can get it, or like OneDrive or Google Drive or whatever. I mean a place where computers store things online so they can go get them. When you don't want to put something in a database because of whatever format or however you want to get at it, you use online storage. So ideally, you would make a template. When I started at Microsoft, I was doing this workshop, and I wanted to distribute this giant VM that was like 2 gigs. So my workshop people, so I made an Azure blob, and I threw it in there. I had to spend like 45 minutes undoing the security so I could make it public. And you know what that is? Awesome. Because no one, by accident, is going to leak that stuff. So you can make templates that do that for you. Ideally, you should also classify and label all your data. We can do that. Almost all of the systems now, the databases, even by like the table level, the field, you can add labels to things. So I, as an incident responder, I don't have to respond to incidents at SemGrep, and it's awesome. Incident response is exciting and really hard and stressful. And so when I come along and I see that there's something that's been breached, and it's not labeled, I have to assume it's very bad. But if it says public, then I can be like, whew, and all my hair doesn't immediately turn gray. You can act very differently if you know the data is not sensitive in nature. I don't mean you just go home and you put your feet up, but it's a different experience if you know the level immediately. Ideally, you should monitor access, you should monitor file integrity, you should do port sniffing, like, etc. And you have an alert that tells you, hey, someone is like looking at your online storage in a creepy way, you should check it out. Ideally, these online storage accounts are only accessed by service accounts. So Tanya's account should not be accessing that in the middle of the night. That would be weird for her, but also she shouldn't be accessing it at all. The app that it belongs to should have its own account and identity on the network, and it accesses it. That means if Tanya quits, it still works. And that means, like, if Tanya's trying to access it, you can tell something's wrong. So unless it's in active development, humans shouldn't be accessing them. This is another way that then your systems can monitor and do a better job for you. Yeah. Okay, so containers and orchestration. So a container, which you all know, is like a little tiny virtual machine that only has the parts of the operating system that you need. I was so excited when containers started happening. So I am old, and I've been working in IT a long time, and I was coding before, like when I was a teenager. And when virtual machines came out, I'm like, this is amazing. I could put 2 on the same server. And then containers come out, I'm like, I could put 400 on the same server. I'm out of control. And so then we needed orchestration because it was a mess. And so the orchestration manages all your zillions of containers that you have going around. So you can use something like Kubernetes or one of those other tools that no one uses. And so ideally, you want to follow all the same practices you would, right? You're going to scan all the things that can be scanned. You're going to patch things or replace them if you're doing immutable infrastructure. But there's special things that are different than virtual machines. And so there are new configurations, which means you need to learn new rules, which is fine. There's new types of vulnerabilities to watch out for, but most of them are everyone trying to escape the sandbox. They want to get to the host system. That's the most common thing that they're trying to aim for. You don't want that to happen, but still, just like you would, you use the tool, you scan for the things, you update the things. Ideally, you want to protect who can create containers. One of my clients was like, so I learned, remember you said not to do that, not to let just everyone make containers? Yeah, so I let the co-op student make containers, and it cost me $30,000. They put 2 extra zeros. 2 extra zeros on how many containers to make. And by the time they noticed, $30,000. So it's really important you manage who can do that. So again, similar approach, scan, check your configs, etc. But there's a bit more. Please don't run as root. Unless you're doing a workshop and learning something, like if you're at work and you're doing production stuff, don't run as root. It's easier to run as root. It's always easier to do a crappy job, but don't run as root, please. I'm saying it because over and over and over, pen tester friends tell me. So limit resources. So set quotas on everything. I know that auto-scaling's awesome. It's totally awesome till you get your bill. So set quotas and limits on things and your life will be better. Turn on multi-factor authentication on if it can buy something, it needs to have multi-factor on it. If it can edit, you want to have MFA. Secure your container registries. You would not believe how many clients are like, why do the devs keep downloading things from Docker Hub and putting it in prod? I'm like, why have you not blocked Docker Hub? Like Docker Hub's a super fun place to play around. You should not be getting things from there and putting it in production. What are you doing? Do you just lick garbage too? No. Sorry, I'm rude. Okay, then lastly, don't download or use untrusted containers. So containers from places, if you don't know where it came from, you shouldn't be using it. It sounds so obvious, but I'm saying it because people have told it to me over and over and over and over and over again. Okay, so APIs and microservices. So an API, a web API is like a web app, but with no front end. They just go and perform services for you. They're awesome. They're our friends. The front end's like, could you go do this? And the API is like, sure thing, man. And then a microservice is a tiny API that just does one thing. So you might have a front end, and if it's a microservice architecture, you'll have hundreds of APIs that all do different little things. And it's great because if one goes down, the rest of your app still works. It's terrible because it's very complicated. So it's kind of awesome, and it's kind of really complicated. I still think it's cool. I've seen companies that move towards microservice architecture, and now they're moving back to the monolith because they're like, that was too hard. So I'm confused. We'll see what happens in the long run. We still need to do all the best secure coding things that we need to do. So there's no front end. So maybe you don't need to output in code. Maybe you can count on the front end to do that. I don't know if I would count on it, but you could. But you still need to input validate, you still need to use store procedures, all those things. And see how there's a cute sun? So I like to put them through a service mesh so that they can go really fast, so they can be encrypted end to end. There's all sorts of cool features. Who was it? Jose Carlos, who was talking about all the super cool stuff you can do with Istio. Ideally, you want to have a standard. I have talked to so many companies where they're like, we're doing GraphQL, and we're doing SOAP, and we're also doing OpenAPI, and we're miserable. Just pick one, right? Ideally, you have a standard, and everyone follows it. I think it's important to lint your APIs and perform static analysis. So linting's like code quality, making sure that you're following the protocol to the letter of the law. You will create a better API if you do that. And then I run a SAST on it after. I always want an API gateway and some of the functionality it offers. I just learned that they just started offering input validation last year. A bunch of them started offering input validation. This is so cool. They do authentication, they do authorization. Awesome. But one of the best things is all the rate limiting. So I want to have it slow down if someone keeps asking it stupid questions. And then after a certain point, I want it to stop and be like, I'm sorry, I can tell you're a bot, please go away. And so these are things that your API, your friendly neighborhood API gateway can do for you. I don't sell one, but I think they're great. So this is going to sound ridiculous, but you should authenticate, figure out who you're talking to before you authorize, before you open that door. I'm saying it because we see it enough times. It needs to go on the slide. So we always do it in that order. And then lastly, so when the first time I did a pen test on an API, so I'm Canadian, that's the accent that you are hearing. At some point, I probably said aboot. I will deny it. But we're very polite, and it's not just a stereotype, like it's painful. And so I'm pen testing this API, and I send it this terrible request, and it's like, I'm sorry, that's the wrong format. Here's the format I need. Why are you telling me this? Who's going to see this other than an attacker, right? And so that just kept helping me until my attack was successful. And so I had to call the team, and I'm like, I know this hurts you, but please just be like, error, bad input. They're like, that's so rude. I'm like, no one but an attacker should ever see this error message. You're allowed to be rude to them. So please give away minimal information. And then lastly, so usually with web apps, we use get and post all day long, right? With APIs, we need more. We probably need update. We probably need delete. We might need put. That's cool. Turn off all the other HTTP methods, sometimes called HTTP verbs. So like, do we need trace? Do we need head? No, we should disable those, because as a pen tester, I'm like, I'm going to talk dirty to your API. Oh, you don't want me to update it? I'm going to update it. Oh, what does trace do? What's this do? So I'm going to just send everything I can. And malicious actors are the same way. We are jerk faces. And so it's really important you block all of those, because APIs will respond. You don't want them to respond. Okay, so summary very briefly. So we covered zero trust. We covered assume breach. We talked about securing serverless and logic apps, which means cloud workflow. I worked at Microsoft, and I'm still recovering. I still say everything the Microsoft way. And so it's not a logic app. It's a cloud workflow. It's not a secret store. It's a secret management tool. We talked about securing third-party components and how software supply chains more than just our libraries. We talked about securing online storage and how darn important it is, because all our data is in there, containers and orchestration, APIs, and microservices. So briefly, I want to talk about automating boring stuff. Who here loves automating? Yeah, it's the best. It's so fun. I remember my boss saying like, oh, that's going to take you forever. I'm like, I hope so. I'm such a nerd. So we want to avoid manual toil. We want to avoid errors. We want to make everything faster. And so computers, they're not as smart as us. They can't really think for themselves. They can't really be creative. I hope the AI isn't listening. But they're not as smart as us yet. And but what they can do is perfectly repeat what we tell them to do. And I can't perfectly repeat something 100 times. I would love to tell you the 90th time, but probably 6 or 7, I've made an error, right? And so when we automate things, we remove the boring parts of our job. We remove the errors that we shouldn't have never happened. And life is better. And so what can we automate? So I love DevSecOps. To me, DevSecOps is the automating cool, fun part of the security part of my job, right? And so this is me building stuff into pipelines. This is me making sure that every time someone checks code in, it gets a scan, and then they get an email telling them, you made a boo-boo. It's me automating things so that the developers can receive feedback faster, that is more accurate, and in a ideally, more convenient manner for them. I don't want them to have to RDP into a server and then log into another system and then dig through their whole team's results and then finally find the bug on page 34. I want it to just show up in Jira for them. I want it to be a GitHub issue ticket. I want it to be whatever the thing is, that the way they work. And me automating those things, I like to call that DevSecOps. Parallel security pipeline. So I'll do all those fast things in the release pipeline, but then sometimes I have tools that are just slow. I don't know what to tell you. Like sometimes I just want to run more than one stack analysis tool because let's say I need a really high level of security assurance. So I'm going to run a big, slow, fat, old one to find everything that my super fast new one might have missed. And like I'll run that in a pipeline at the same time, but that doesn't block anything. So you're still doing this and this and that. I'm like, good enough, go to prod, have fun there. And then I'm going to do a super deep one, and then I'm going to dig through those results tomorrow when they come in and see if there's anything in there that I think is worth fixing. And so you can do this. You can automate it. You can have, I remember my boss at Microsoft, he's like, Tanya, software is free. Just make more. Just make another pipeline, Tanya. We're Microsoft. We can afford the cloud time. And so I just, okay, well, I could just have it do a whole bunch of things. So you can do that. SecOps is fun. So infrastructure as code. I'm such a huge fan. You can automatically scan it for problems. You can also automatically change it. So called security as code. You can actually add the stuff that's missing to the infrastructure as code and just make it do it for you. There's lots of different ways you can do security as code. But when we automate as much as humanly possible and we test it to make sure it's good, we can be proactive and do even cooler work. So we can work to prevent incidents. We can upgrade our security. We can spend less time cleaning up messes. And so I like to think of DevSecOps as less toil and more triumph. I don't want to do that boring work. I want to do the super cool work. And when we invest at the beginning in all these automations, in 6 months, your job's so awesome, and your boss hopefully likes you even better. Okay, so last part, then I swear I'm going to wrap up, continuous learning. So you showed up here today to learn. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time, because I have worked with people that think they know everything, and those are the people that should be here the most. So the moment we stop prioritizing learning, we fall behind. It happens so fast. Every single moment for us can be a teaching moment. And so I try really hard when things go wrong and when things go right to stop and tell my team like, hey, this happened. I learned this from this. And not everyone always appreciates that, but I'm like, guess what? Story time. Let me tell you how I screwed this up. But then no one else makes that mistake, right? You security folks, you see mistakes all the time, especially if you're a pen tester or an AppSec person, you see mistakes all the time. You can just tell that one person, or you can create a lunch and learn and tell everyone in your office. And then if you're allowed to, you could go to the local OWASP meetup and you could tell them there too. You could speak at a conference and share it with the world, right? I find a problem with our industry is we are very, very afraid to admit a mistake. We're terrified if we show any weakness that our competitors will pounce, that will look bad on the internet, that will be canceled or whatever. It's okay to make a security mistake. It's not okay to make that same mistake a whole bunch more times, but it's way better if we can help everyone else not make that mistake ever again. And so I would like to encourage all of you to share a little more, which I know is hard because I have made out of NDAs. I have signed so many NDAs you would not believe. So we can do micro lessons. We can do lunch and learns. You don't have to. So I sell security training. You don't have to hire us. You can just teach your team. It could be an email where it's a thing that you've learned. It could be, I saw this really cool talk at this conference. I'd like the team to watch it sometime this month. Developers and op folks are constantly bringing in new tech, and we security folks need to keep up. If we don't, they will go and do it without us. Yes, that's right. If you don't get back to them, they still implement the thing, and they don't care. They have stuff to do. And so you can do a thing I've had great success with is creating a learning block. So every Thursday from 10 till noon, not now because I'm not on a dev team, and because I don't really have a team. I'm a team of one. But normally when I have a team, it's like, okay, so every Thursday, these 2 hours, I want you to be teaching yourself something. I could buy you a subscription to Safari Books Online, Pluralsight, wherever you want, but I need you to be learning something. Or if not that, then okay, so go to a conference once a year or do this or do that. But these learning blocks have been really powerful. I finished 3 university courses doing learning blocks like that. Job shadowing, mentoring, on-the-job training, that counts. That's how I learned to be a pen tester. I didn't take a course. I followed a dude around for like a year. Sharing info with others, like wins and losses. Metrics-based training. So if you can scan everything where you work, and then you see these 3 mistakes keep happening over and over, create training about that. That's the best bang you're ever going to get for your buck, right? Like, and then see those mistakes go down in nature. Build your own training specific to your org. Oh, it's story time. So I went and spoke at RSA in 2018. And I gave a talk about DevOps, because I love DevOps. And my friend called me after. She's like, did you know you invented DevOps? I'm like, I didn't do that. I wish I did. I did not. And she's like, yeah, my colleague thinks you invented DevOps, because he had not taken training in like a decade. He'd never heard of DevOps. He thinks you're a god. So in my dreams, I invented DevOps, and in that guy's mind. But imagine, he was their senior tech, their senior architect had never heard of DevOps. This was 2018. True, not true at all. Okay, so conclusion, mini rant. So I'm so tired of everyone thinking of this guy when we talk about our industry. That is not what a hacker looks like. This is what a hacker looks like. I don't know if you saw, so in America, there was sort of a thing for a little while where people made shirts saying, this is what a hacker looks like, and this is my friend Steph wearing one. Hackers look to your left and your right. That's what hackers look like. They don't look like Mr. Robot. Some of them do, but most of them don't. And I want us to change our industry so people realize that people that work in cyber, it can be all types of people. We need them to come work with us. I want us to be nice to developers. They're our friends. All of IT are our allies, and I want us to work with them more. I want us to have them like us better. Most companies I work with, everyone's kind of pissed at the security team. We got to stop that if we want to succeed. That's the end of that part of the rant. And now I have some resources for you. So you might want to get your cameras out to take pictures. So I really like books. I love the DevOps Handbook, the Phoenix Project, Accelerate, the Unicorn Project, Investments Unlimited. Those are by a bunch of people who I think are awesome. They give talks and do all sorts of cool stuff. And then the last book is my book, and me and my mom highly recommend it. Oh, there it is. Cyber Mentoring Monday. So every single Monday on Twitter, but also Blue Sky now, so all 300 of my followers there, and Mastodon. I help pair people and connect people with professional mentors. If you are like, I don't need a mentor, cool, please be one. Take someone under your wing and change their entire life. Resources SumGrep. So we have a newsletter, we have a Slack channel, you can use our product for free forever, which I don't understand how that works, but I'm not in charge of paying the bills. We have a free version and a paid version. But you can join our newsletter, etc., if you want to. And resources me. Oh, why is it not? Come up. There we go. So I have a newsletter. I have a blog. I have a YouTube channel. I do stuff on the internet, and it's a lot like this. So if you liked this, I have a lot more. And then with that, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much. We have 7 minutes for questions, and then I'm going to stand outside and answer questions until you're bored of me. Does anyone have a question? Also, there's tons and tons of stickers up here. Please come and take them, then I don't have to carry them back across the ocean. Questions? Yes. You. Okay, yes. Okay, so anything that, so when you're doing the CI/CD, and let's say you're scanning infrastructure as code, and you realize something's missing, you can actually just write code to add it. So that would be one example. Another example would be let's say you're scanning some code of an app, and you're like, oh, the security header's missing. You could just add it. You could write your own script, which I've done not very many times, but enough times, and I just add it to my CI/CD, and it just runs the little script I wrote, and it just checks the thing that's important to us, And it's not important enough that a dynamic scanner or whoever is going to add it to their product, but for us, it's important. So I write a little script and I just check it. So that's security as code. Any code you write to just enforce the security policy you want. Nice. You.
What do you think about system's proposal related to secure by default? Secure by design?
Okay, so whose proposal, or sorry, what do I think of the idea of it?
The idea just secure by design and secure by default.
Okay, secure by design and secure by default, I feel are different. So secure by design, the idea is that you have built security into the design itself, which I think we should all do. Secure by default. So if you set defaults that are the most secure way to do the thing, like 80% of your users will just leave it on. And then you've tricked them into doing the secure thing. And I don't mean to sound rude, I'm all for tricking our users into doing the right thing. And so if we can make all the defaults and the easiest way to do the thing the most secure way, it's better. Some examples of secure defaults. So I work at SemGrep, so forgive me, I'm going to talk about theirs. So they have a SAST and you can like run scans and do stuff, right? But you could also write a rule yourself. And every time you check code in, it's just like, oh, I'm sorry, you broke that rule. Nope. Same with like secret scanners, right? So as you check your code in, it's like, that's obviously a password. What are you doing? I'm not going to check you in at all, so it doesn't go into your history, your archive, etc. You don't have to rotate the secret. No, thank you. And so you can set secure defaults by like basically it scans very important things before it checks in. You're like, no, I don't think so. And so that's one way you could do a secure default. So you've stopped them from doing the bad thing. So by default, you just can't check your code in. And then you're like grumpy, but then you fix it and then it's okay. So I'm for it.
I want MFA to be lasting and free.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I want MFA to be free. The whole MFA tax, not cool. Who's here has heard of MFA tax? Basically, like if you want to be able to turn, and the SSO tax. Oh, I want single sign-on. Cool, our product costs 4 times as much now. What? Yeah, I had that happen recently and it was 4x. And so I was like, no, thank you, I'll figure it out. Any more questions? I have 3 minutes. Well, then I guess I clearly taught you all of security. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to go hang out there and I'm going to have stickers and I appreciate you. Have a great day.